Do I have a favourite question for interviews? I don't actually have a favourite question. I have a favourite mindset. And for me, immersion beats interviews every time. Interviews give you a fragmentation. They give you a little snapshot. But for me, immersion gives you that full story. It gives you the story behind the story. And what immersion allows you to do is ultimately sit in that world, sit with the people, watch them in the flow of work, spot their workarounds, their habits, their frictions. And that's where the real insight lies. That's where the truth kind of often shows up for people. And it's not just about what they say, it's actually what they do. But that being said, immersion over interviews requires 4 lenses. So the first lens is what I call intimate. And this is your one-to-ones, your small focus group. But this is where you catch them emotional cues. This is where you catch what people don't necessarily say, but how they say it. And this isn't about you becoming like a body reading expert, a body language reading expert, because no. Now that being said, there's a second lens. And that second lens is what I call active. So this is where you shadow someone in their flow of work, asking, why did you do that? How come you did that? What's your workaround to this challenge? How did you come up with that workaround? And this is where you get to be more in the moment, contextually, and this often helps you reveal kind of the hidden hacks, what your people have used to overcome their problem. From that point onwards, you've got what I call distance. And this distance is where you step back and you watch not only that person, but the environment in which they operate in, the props they're using, the unconscious habits and the system, how it operates around them. And then from that point onwards, you've got what I call external. And that external is where there's many industries outside of your world who have the same problem, and they've come up with their own way of fixing this, okay? So you have to look at them and go, how have they overcome this? How have they overcome the same challenge? And that will also allow you to identify potential solutions later on down the line. You've got them 4 lenses, but there is still kind of like the questions. And for me, when I think about the questions, it's all about simpleness, brilliant basics. I still use the 6 bums on a goalpost. What, where, when, who, how. I think that's 5. Anyway, it sounds basic, but these 6 questions stood the test of time. You listen to any good interviewer, any good podcaster, and they're using these type of questions all the time. Now, usually these questions are also then followed up by TED questions, which is tell me, explain to me, describe / demonstrate. And what these TED questions allow you to do is continue that conversation and continue to get more and more rich data from that. They're really good at just opening the door and moving that conversation past kind of top level answers. Now, what I listen for when I do this is something I learned in university. When I was doing crime scene investigation, is leakage. This is around them slips between, what's said and what's meant. And often the truth leaks out between them lines. So you're looking for kind of contradictions here in the story. You're looking for little truths, hesitations, silences and whatnot. Your goal here is not to apply any form of bias on top of that. You're just looking for that to kind of know when to zoom in, to dig in more. That's all you're really here for. The other thing to kind of think about when you've got questions is your listening. So there's a couple of channels of listening what I kind of always focus on. The problem is most people tune out when it comes to listening. They're waiting for someone to stop to ask the next question, which is why I don't use interview guides when we're doing one-to-ones. But there's a couple of lenses what you want to be constantly listening to. The first one is perspective listening. Okay, this is about you trying to step into their world and understand it from their point of view, okay? The next one is opportunity listening. And this is where you're using empathy, but with their context. Again, it's not about you coming up with solutions, it's about you trying to understand their world. And once you can start to understand their world, you start to ask better questions. Going back to the initial question, is there a magic question? No, I don't think there's a magic killer question. I think immersions will always be interviews. Immerse yourself in their world, use the basics really well and listen deeply, and you'll be amazed at the amount of insight and data you can get from that without having to think about a killer question.